The horse had been dead for 3 days when Clara Kendall finally admitted she was not going to make it out of these mountains alive. She sat on a flat rock overlooking a valley so vast it made her feel like a speck of dust, her legs trembling from exhaustion, her lips cracked and bleeding from the relentless sun that seemed determined to finish what the bandits had started. The September heat of 1872 in the Nevada mountains was unforgiving, and Clara had run out of water that morning. Her canteen lay empty beside her, mocking her with its lightness. The stage robbery had happened so fast one moment she had been dozing against the window, dreaming of her new teaching position in Carleen, and the next, gunfire had erupted and the driver was slumped over and passengers were screaming. She had run. God help her, she had just run into the wilderness without thinking, and now she was paying the price for her panic. The sun was beginning its descent when she heard the sound that made her heart leap with desperate hope. Hoofbeats, heavy and steady, coming from somewhere above her on the mountain trail. Clara struggled to her feet, swaying dangerously, and tried to call out, but her throat was so dry that only a weak rasp emerged. She stumbled forward, her worn boots catching on rocks, and nearly fell before a massive hand caught her arm. She looked up and up and up. The man towering over her was the largest human being Clara had ever seen. He stood well over 6 feet, with shoulders so broad they blocked out the setting sun behind him. His arms, bare to the elbow where his rough shirt was rolled up, were corded with muscle that flexed as he steadied her. Long dark hair fell past his collar, wild and unkempt, and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face. His eyes, a startling gray blue like winter ice, studied her with an intensity that made her feel examined down to her bones. "Water," she managed to whisper. He did not speak. Instead, he lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing at all, and Clara found herself cradled against a chest that felt like warm stone. She should have been frightened. This wild-looking mountain man could do anything he wanted to her out here where no one would hear her scream, but something in the careful way he held her made her feel safer than she had in days. He carried her to his horse, a sturdy roan gelding, and set her down gently before retrieving a canteen from his saddle. "Slow," he said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to come from somewhere in his chest. "Drink slow or you will be sick." Clara obeyed, taking small sips of the most delicious water she had ever tasted. It was cool and sweet, likely from a mountain stream, and she had to force herself not to gulp it down. When she had drunk enough, she looked up at her rescuer again, really seeing him this time. His face was weathered and tanned, the skin around his eyes creased from squinting into the sun. His beard was thick and dark brown with hints of auburn in the fading light. He looked to be perhaps 30, maybe a year or two more, with the kind of rugged handsomeness that came from living hard and surviving. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you so much. I thought I was going to die out here." He nodded once, his expression unchanging. "What happened?" Clara told him about the stage robbery, about running blindly into the mountains, about her horse breaking its leg in a ravine and having to be left behind. As she spoke, she watched his face for any reaction, but he remained stoic, listening with absolute focus. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Connor Hayes," he finally said, offering his name like it cost him something. "Clara Kendall." She tried to smile, but her lips hurt too much. "I was supposed to be the new schoolteacher in Carlin." Something flickered in those ice-blue eyes, there and gone so fast she almost missed it. "Carlin is 2 days' ride from here. You went the wrong direction." Of course she had. Clara felt tears prick her eyes but refused to let them fall. She had already looked pathetic enough. "I was not exactly thinking clearly when men with guns were shooting at us." Connor Hayes studied her for another long moment, then turned to his horse and began checking the saddle. "Can you ride?" "Yes." "We will go to my cabin. You need food and rest. Tomorrow I will take you to Carlin." It was not a request or an offer. It was a statement of fact, delivered in that same flat, emotionless tone. Clara found herself nodding, too exhausted to argue even if she had wanted to. When he lifted her onto his horse and swung up behind her, she leaned back against that solid chest and let her eyes close. The rhythmic movement of the horse and the warmth of the man behind her lulled her into a half-doze, aware but not quite awake, safe for the first time since the robbery. The cabin appeared as they rounded a bend in the trail, a sturdy structure of logs nestled against the mountainside with a small corral beside it. 3 horses grazed in the corral, and Clara could see a garden patch that looked well tended despite the harsh conditions. Connor dismounted and lifted her down, then led her inside, while his horse waited patiently. The interior of the cabin was sparse but clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a rocking chair and a small table nearby. A bed with a thick quilt stood in one corner, and shelves lined with supplies and tools covered another wall. It smelled of wood smoke and leather and something else, something wild and masculine that Clara could not quite identify. "Sit," Connor said, pointing to the chair. Clara sat. She watched as he moved around the cabin with efficient purpose, building up the fire, filling a pot with water and setting it to boil, pulling dried meat and vegetables from his stores. He moved like someone who had lived alone for a long time, comfortable in his solitude, every action deliberate and practiced. When he caught her watching him, she quickly looked away, feeling heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the growing fire. Within an hour, she had a bowl of stew in her hands and a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The food was simple but good, and Clara ate slowly, savoring every bite. Connor sat across from her on a wooden stool, eating his own meal in silence. The quiet between them was not uncomfortable exactly, but Clara felt compelled to fill it. "How long have you lived up here?" she asked. 5 years. "That is a long time to be alone." He shrugged, those massive shoulders rolling with the gesture. "I like alone. Do you ever go into town?" "Sometimes, for supplies." Getting information from this man was like prying open an oyster, Clara thought with amusement. "What did you do before you came to the mountains?" Connor's jaw tightened, and she saw a muscle twitch beneath his beard. "I was a soldier." The way he said it made it clear that topic was closed. Clara took another bite of stew and tried a different approach. "The cabin is very nice. Did you build it yourself?" "Yes." "And the garden too?" "Yes." "You must be very self-sufficient." "Have to be up here." Clara set down her empty bowl and pulled the blanket tighter around herself. She was warm now, fed and safe, and the exhaustion she had been fighting for days was catching up with her. Her eyelids felt heavy, and she caught herself starting to nod off. "You take the bed," Connor said, standing abruptly. "I will sleep by the fire." "I cannot take your bed," Clara protested weakly. "This is your home. You are injured and exhausted. You need proper rest." His tone left no room for argument. "I have slept in worse places than a floor." Too tired to argue further, Clara let him help her to the bed. As she sank into the surprisingly comfortable mattress, she realized she had not asked him what he was doing out on that trail, how he had found her. But the questions could wait until morning. She was asleep before he had even finished spreading his bedroll by the fire. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. For a disoriented moment, she could not remember where she was, but then the events of the previous day came flooding back. She sat up carefully, her muscles aching from days of walking and dehydration, and found Connor standing at the fireplace with his back to her, cooking breakfast. In the morning light streaming through the single window, she could see him more clearly. He wore dark pants tucked into tall boots and a blue shirt that strained across his back with every movement. His hair, which had looked simply dark the night before, showed hints of auburn in the sunlight, and she noticed it was actually quite long, nearly reaching his shoulders. Everything about him suggested strength and capability, from the way he stood to the casual competence with which he handled the cooking. "Morning," she said softly. He turned, and she saw that his eyes looked less cold in the daylight, not warm exactly, but not quite so forbidding. "You slept well?" "Better than I have in days. Thank you again for everything. I owe you my life." Connor shook his head. "You survived on your own for 3 days. You are stronger than you think." The compliment, coming from this taciturn mountain man, felt more valuable than any flowery praise Clara had ever received. She smiled, and this time her lips did not hurt quite so much. "I suppose I did not have much choice." "There is always a choice. You chose to survive." He handed her a plate of food and a cup of coffee, and Clara ate gratefully. The bacon was perfectly crispy, and the coffee was strong and hot, exactly what she needed. As she ate, Connor gathered supplies and packed saddlebags with practiced efficiency. "The ride to Carlin will take 2 days," he said without looking at her. "We will camp tonight. and reach the town tomorrow afternoon. You really do not have to do this, Clara said, though she had no idea what alternative she could suggest. I am sure you have important things to do. Nothing more important than getting you somewhere safe. The simple declaration made Clara's heart do a strange little flip in her chest. She told herself it was just gratitude, nothing more. This man had saved her life, and she was naturally feeling emotional about it. That was all. They left within the hour, both riding Connor's roan gelding since Clara's horse was long gone. She sat in front of him this time, very aware of his arms on either side of her as he held the reins, very aware of the solid warmth of him at her back. The morning was cool, but she knew it would heat up as the day progressed. They rode mostly in silence, though occasionally Connor would point out a landmark or name a peak in the distance. By midday, Clara's curiosity got the better of her. You said you were a soldier. Did you fight in the war? She felt him tense behind her. Yes. Which side? Union. I was with Sherman's march. Clara had heard stories about Sherman's march to the sea, about the destruction and devastation. She wondered what horrors Connor Hayes had seen, what things he had done that made him flee to these mountains and live alone for 5 years. Is that why you came here, to get away from all that? Yes. Do you have family anywhere? No, they are all gone now. The pain in those 4 words was so raw that Clara reached back without thinking and touched his hand where it rested on the saddle horn. Connor went absolutely still, so still that even the horse seemed to sense it and slowed its pace. Clara realized what she had done and started to pull her hand away, but his fingers caught hers and held them gently. I'm sorry, she said softly. I should not have pried. It is all right. His voice was rough, like he had not used it to discuss emotions in a very long time. It was a long time ago. They rode on, and Connor did not let go of her hand. Clara told herself she should pull away, that this was improper, but the truth was she did not want to. His hand was warm and calloused and strong, and holding it made her feel anchored in a way she had not felt since leaving Boston 3 weeks ago. As the day wore on, Connor began to talk more. Not a lot, but more than he had before. He told her about the mountains, about the wildlife and the changing seasons, about the harsh winters and the brief glorious summers. He told her about finding the spot for his cabin, about felling the trees and notching the logs, about building something with his own hands after years of destroying. Clara listened, fascinated by this glimpse into his solitary life. When the sun began to set, Connor led them to a small clearing beside a stream. He helped Clara down and immediately began setting up camp with the same efficient movements he used for everything. Within minutes, he had a fire going and was laying out bedrolls. Clara tried to help, but he waved her away. You are still recovering. Rest. I've been resting all day, Clara protested. Let me do something. Connor looked at her for a long moment, then handed her his canteen. Fill this, and drink as much as you need from the stream. The water's good here. Clara took the canteen and made her way to the stream, grateful for something to do. The water was indeed cold and delicious, and she drank her fill before refilling the canteen. When she returned to the camp, Connor had laid out more food-dried meat, hardtack, some dried fruit. Not fancy, but adequate. They ate as the stars began to appear overhead, thousands of them in a display that took Clara's breath away. She had never seen so many stars, not in Boston with its city lights, not even on the stage journey west. Here in the mountains, with no civilization for miles, the sky was ablaze with light. It is beautiful, she breathed. Connor looked up, following her gaze. Yes, this is why I stay. Even in winter, even when you are alone? Especially then. Clara turned to look at him, studying his profile in the firelight. Do you never get lonely? I used to think I preferred being alone. He met her eyes, and something in his expression made her breath catch. I am less certain of that now. The air between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken things. Clara knew she should look away, should break this moment before it became something neither of them was ready for. Instead, she found herself leaning slightly toward him, drawn by an invisible thread. Connor reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull back, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered against her cheek, rough but gentle, and Clara felt herself trembling, not from fear or cold, but from something else entirely, something that scared and thrilled her in equal measure. "Clara," he said, her name a rumble in his chest. "Yes? I want to kiss you, but I will not unless you want it too." Her heart hammered so hard she was certain he could hear it. She should say no. She barely knew this man. She was supposed to be a respectable school teacher, not the kind of woman who kissed mountain men under the stars after knowing them less than a day. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, "I want it too." Connor cupped her face in both his large hands, his touch infinitely careful, and lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was soft at first, questioning, but when Clara responded, pressing closer, it deepened into something that made her toes curl in her boots. His beard was softer than she had imagined, and she found herself reaching up to touch it, to feel the texture of it against her palms. The moment her fingers made contact with his beard, Connor went completely still, not pulling away but frozen like a statue, his lips still pressed to hers. Clara's hand lingered there, feeling the surprising softness of the hair, feeling the strong line of his jaw beneath it, and something shifted in the air around them. It was as if the whole world had tilted on its axis, as if everything that had come before this moment had simply been preparation for right now, for her hand on his face and his lips on hers and the stars wheeling overhead. When Connor finally pulled back, his eyes were wide and almost shocked. He stared at Clara like he was seeing her for the first time, like she had transformed into something miraculous right before his eyes. "Connor," Clara whispered, her hand still against his cheek. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong." His voice was hoarse. "Everything just changed. My whole world just changed." Clara did not understand what he meant, but she could see the truth of it in his eyes. Something profound had happened, something that went beyond a simple kiss. Connor took her hand from his face and pressed his lips to her palm, his eyes closing. "I did not think I could feel like this again," he said quietly. "I thought the war had killed that part of me." "What part?" "The part that wants, the part that hopes, the part that looks at a woman and thinks about a future instead of just surviving day to day." Clara's throat tightened with emotion. "I feel it too. I do not understand it, but I feel it." They sat there by the fire for hours, talking in a way they had not before. Connor told her about growing up on a farm in Ohio, about his parents dying of fever when he was 17, about joining the army because he had nowhere else to go. He told her about the things he had seen in the war, the friends he had lost, the way he had felt hollowed out and empty when it finally ended. He told her about coming west to disappear, to live alone where his nightmares could not hurt anyone else. Clara told him about growing up in Boston as the daughter of a minister, about her father's death 2 years ago, about her mother remarrying a man Clara could not stand. She told him about applying for the teaching position in Carlin as an escape, about her excitement and terror at heading west alone, about her dreams of making a difference in children's lives. "You will be a good teacher," Connor said. "You are patient and kind. You barely know me." "I know enough." They finally bedded down on opposite sides of the fire, but Clara found herself unable to sleep. She could hear Connor's breathing across from her, steady and deep, and she wondered if he was really asleep or just pretending, like she was. The kiss kept replaying in her mind, along with that moment when she had touched his beard and felt the world shift. She had never believed in love at first sight before. It seemed like something from fairy tales, not real life, but this feeling in her chest, this bone-deep certainty that Connor Hayes was important, that he mattered in a way no one else ever had, what else could it be? The next morning dawned clear and bright, and they continued their journey to Carlin. Connor seemed different today, more open, quicker to smile. He pointed out a golden eagle soaring overhead, showed her tracks from a mountain lion that had passed during the night, told her about the abandoned mining camps they passed and the men who had sought fortune and found only hardship. "Do you ever prospect for gold or silver?" Clara asked. "No, I have enough." At her curious look, he explained, "I do some trapping, sell the furs in town. I guide hunters sometimes, people who want to shoot elk or bear. It is enough for what I need, which is not much. Which used to be not much," he corrected. "I find my needs changing." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks and was glad he could not see her face from his position behind her. They stopped for a midday meal beside another stream, and this time Clara helped prepare the food, working alongside Connor in a companionable silence that felt natural and right. When their hands brushed while reaching for the same canteen, Connor caught her fingers and brought them to his lips. "I am not good with words," he said, "but I want you to know that meeting you has meant something to me, something important." "It has meant something to me too," Clara replied. "I know we have only known each other a short time, but time does not matter. Not for this." "For what?" Connor reached up and gently touched her cheek. "For falling in love." Clara's breath caught. "Connor, you do not have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. When we get to Carlin and you start your new life, I want you to know that somewhere in these mountains there is a man who loves you, who will always love you." Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks before she could stop them. "You foolish man. Do you think I could just forget about you? Do you think I could go on with my life and teach school and pretend I never met you? You have a future in Carlin. You have a purpose, a job. I will not ask you to give that up to live in a cabin in the middle of nowhere with a broken man who has more nightmares than pleasant dreams." Clara grabbed the front of his shirt with both hands. "What if I want to? What if I think you are worth it? You do not know what you are saying. Stop telling me what I know and do not know." Her voice rose with frustration. "I am an educated woman, Connor Hayes. I am perfectly capable of making my own decisions, and I have decided that I love you too. I love your strength and your gentleness and the way you take care of things. I love how you listen when I talk and how you look at the mountains like they are the most beautiful thing in the world. I love your silence and your rare smiles and the way you make me feel safe and cherished and seen." Connor stared at her, his expression a mixture of wonder and disbelief. "Clara, I know it is fast, I know it is crazy, but when have people in love ever been sensible?" He pulled her into his arms then, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, his face buried in her hair. "I do not deserve you. Let me be the judge of that." They held each other for a long time, there beside the stream with the sun warm on their backs and the sound of water over stones filling the air. When they finally pulled apart, Connor's eyes were suspiciously bright. "What do we do?" he asked. "You still have your teaching position. That still matters." "It does matter," Clara agreed. "I signed a contract. I need to honor it. But Carlin is only 2 days' ride from your cabin. We could see each other. I could come up on weekends when there's no school, or you could come to town. We could court properly, like respectable people." A smile tugged at Connor's lips. "You want to court a mountain man? I want to court you. The mountain man part just comes with the package." They reached Carlin late the next afternoon, riding into town as the sun painted the desert sky in shades of orange and gold. Carlin was a small town, dusty and rough around the edges, with a main street lined by wooden buildings that had seen better days. The Transcontinental Railroad ran through the town, bringing a steady stream of travelers and commerce that kept the place alive. Connor rode straight to the schoolhouse, a modest building at the edge of town with a small house attached where the teacher lived. A woman in her 50s was sweeping the front steps, and she looked up in surprise as they approached. "Can I help you?" she asked, her eyes going from Connor to Clara with obvious curiosity. Clara slid down from the horse, her legs wobbling slightly after so many hours of riding. "I am Clara Kendall, the new school teacher. I apologize for arriving later than expected. There was an incident with the stagecoach." The woman's eyes widened. "Oh my goodness, you are the one from the robbery. We heard about it days ago. Everyone assumed you had been killed." "I very nearly was. This is Connor Hayes. He saved my life." The woman looked at Connor with new respect, though Clara noticed she still seemed a bit intimidated by his size and wild appearance. "Well, Mr. Hayes, the town owes you a debt of gratitude. I am Martha Donnelly. My husband is the mayor. Come inside, both of you. You must be exhausted." Martha ushered them into the little house, chattering the whole time about the town, the school, the students Clara would be teaching. There were about 20 children of various ages, she explained, from families who ranched or worked for the railroad or ran businesses in town. The previous teacher had left to get married, and they had been without proper schooling for nearly 2 months. "You will start on Monday," Martha said, showing Clara the small but comfortable rooms that would be her home. "That gives you 3 days to settle in and prepare. The school board will provide your salary, and you are free to use the supplies in the schoolroom." Clara thanked her profusely, and Martha finally left them alone, though not before inviting them both to dinner at her house that evening. When the door closed, Clara turned to Connor, suddenly shy now that they were in her new home. "So this is where I will be living," she said unnecessarily. Connor looked around the room, his expression unreadable. "It is nice. Safe. Connor." He crossed to her in 2 long strides and pulled her into his arms. "I know. I have to go, but I will come back. Next weekend, I will come back." "Promise?" "I promise. Wild horses could not keep me away." They stood there holding each other until the light faded and Martha came knocking to escort them to dinner. The evening was pleasant, but awkward, with Martha and her husband asking Connor countless questions that he answered in his typical brief fashion. Clara could see he was uncomfortable, unused to so much social interaction, and she made an excuse for them to leave early. Outside the Donnelly house, Connor took both her hands in his. "I should ride out now, make some distance before I have to camp." "Could you not stay, just for tonight?" "If I stay, I will not want to leave in the morning, and you need time to prepare for your new job." Clara knew he was right, but it did not make saying goodbye any easier. "Be safe. Please be safe." "Always." He bent and kissed her, soft and sweet, then pulled back before she could deepen it. "I love you, Clara Kendall." "I love you too, Connor Hayes." She watched him ride out of town, a solitary figure on horseback disappearing into the darkness, and felt a piece of her heart go with him. But she squared her shoulders and turned back toward her new home. She had work to do, children to teach, a life to build. And in a week, Connor would be back. The week passed in a blur of activity. Clara threw herself into preparing the schoolroom, organizing supplies, planning lessons, and meeting the families whose children she would be teaching. The town welcomed her warmly, and she found herself becoming fond of Carlin with its rough charm and friendly people. But every night she lay in her small bed and thought of Connor alone in his mountain cabin, and she ached with missing him. Saturday afternoon, she was sweeping the schoolroom floor when she heard hoofbeats outside. Her heart leaped, and she dropped the broom, running to the door. Connor sat astride his roan horse, looking tired and dusty from his journey, but he was smiling, really smiling, when he saw her. Clara flew down the steps and into his arms, not caring who might see. Connor caught her easily, lifting her feet off the ground and spinning her once before setting her down. "You came," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "I told you I would." They spent the weekend walking through town, with Clara showing him her schoolroom and introducing him to her new acquaintances. Connor was polite but reserved, clearly uncomfortable with so many people, but he endured it for her sake. On Sunday, they rode out into the desert, finding a quiet spot by a small spring where they could be alone. "I hate leaving you here," Connor said, lying on his back on a blanket and staring up at the cloudless sky. "But I cannot ask you to give up your position. You are already making a difference with those children." Clara, lying beside him with her head on his shoulder, said, "What if we did not have to choose? What if there was a way to have both?" "What do you mean?" "The school term runs from September to May. What if I taught during those months and spent the summers with you in the mountains, and you could come to town on weekends when possible?" Connor was quiet for so long that Clara thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "That is still months apart. Months where we would barely see each other." "I know, but it is better than nothing. And Connor, the more I teach, the more I realize how important this work is. These children need education. They need someone who cares. I cannot just abandon them." "I'm not asking you to. But you are torn. I can see it." He rolled onto his side to face her, propping himself up on one elbow. "I am torn because I love you and I want you with me, but I also love that you have passion for something beyond yourself. The truth is, I need to figure out how to exist in the world again, not just hide in the mountains. Maybe courting a schoolteacher who lives in town is exactly what I need." Clara reached up and stroked his beard, marveling at how the simple gesture made him close his eyes like a contented cat. Maybe we are exactly what each other needs. They courted through the fall, with Connor riding down to Carlin every weekend without fail. He began to relax more around the townspeople, even striking up a friendship with the blacksmith, a gruff man named Tom who appreciated Connor's quiet competence. Clara's students were curious about the large mountain man who courted their teacher, and Connor surprised everyone by showing the older boys how to make animal snares and teaching them about tracking. In October, the first snow fell on the mountains, and Connor arrived in town with a proposal. Not marriage, not yet, but an invitation. "Come up to the cabin next weekend," he said. "I want to show you what winter looks like in the high country before it gets too dangerous to travel." Clara agreed eagerly, and the following Saturday, they made the 2-day journey to his cabin. She fell in love with it immediately, the cozy interior, the stunning views, the profound silence broken only by wind and birdsong. They spent 3 days together, and Connor taught her how to shoot his rifle, how to read weather signs in the clouds, how to make bread in the stone oven built into the fireplace. On the last night before they had to return to Carlion, they lay together in his bed, not impropriety. Clara kept her clothes on, and Connor was nothing but respectful and talked about the future. "Marry me," Connor said into the darkness. Clara's breath caught. "Are you asking or telling?" "Asking, hoping, praying, maybe." She rolled over to face him, trying to see his expression in the firelight. "Yes, of course, yes." Connor pulled her close, and Clara felt him trembling. "I will do better," he said. "I will be better. For you. You are already perfect for me exactly as you are." They married in December, on a bright cold day with snow on the ground and the whole town in attendance. Clara wore a simple blue dress that Martha helped her sew, and Connor wore new clothes that Tom's wife had insisted he buy for the occasion: dark pants, a white shirt, and a black vest that showed off his impressive build. He had trimmed his beard and tied back his hair, and when Clara walked toward him in the little church, the look on his face made her knees weak. The ceremony was brief, and the celebration afterward was warm and joyful. The townspeople had embraced Connor over the past months, recognizing the good man beneath the rough exterior, and they welcomed him fully as one of their own. That night, Connor carried Clara over the threshold of her little house beside the schoolhouse, their house now, and made love to her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. "I love you," he whispered against her skin. "I will spend every day of my life showing you how much." "I love you too," Clara replied, pulling him closer. "My mountain man, my husband, my home." They settled into a rhythm through the winter. During the week, Clara taught school while Connor did odd jobs around town, repairing fences, chopping wood, helping with livestock. On weekends, weather permitting, they would ride up to the cabin and spend time in the mountains. Connor gradually brought his most essential possessions down to Carlin, though he refused to give up the cabin entirely. "It is our retreat," he said. "When the world gets too loud, we can go there and just be." Clara understood. She loved teaching, loved the children in the town, but she also treasured those quiet days in the mountains with just Connor and the wild beauty around them. In February, Clara realized she was pregnant. She told Connor on a Sunday afternoon as they sat by the fireplace in the cabin, watching snow fall outside. He went very still, the way he had that first night when she touched his beard, and then he pulled her into his arms and held her so tightly she squeaked. "A baby," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Happy does not begin to cover it. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "You have given me everything, Clara. A reason to live, not just survive. Purpose, joy, love, and now a child. How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Clara said, kissing him. "We found each other when we both needed finding." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Clara had to endure endless fussing from Martha and the other women in town. She taught school until the end of May as planned, her growing belly a source of great excitement among her students. When summer arrived, Connor took her up to the cabin, insisting she needed rest and fresh mountain air. "The baby will not arrive until September," Clara protested. "I am not an invalid." "I know, but humor me. Let me take care of you." So Clara spent the summer being thoroughly spoiled by her attentive husband. Connor waited on her hand and foot, bringing her cool water from the stream, cooking her favorite meals, rubbing her swollen feet in the evenings. He talked to her belly, telling their unborn child about the mountains and the animals and all the things they would do together. Clara had never been happier. In late August, they returned to Carlin so Clara could be near the doctor when her time came. On September 15th, after 12 hours of labor, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Connor held his son with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face into his beard, and Clara knew she would remember that moment for the rest of her life. They named him Samuel, after Connor's father. Samuel Hayes was a good baby, healthy and strong like his father. Connor proved to be a natural father, patient and gentle despite his size. He would walk Samuel around town, the tiny baby cradled in his massive arms, and the sight never failed to make Clara smile. Clara returned to teaching that October, with Martha and other town women taking turns watching Samuel during school hours. It was exhausting, balancing motherhood and teaching, but Clara thrived on the challenge. Connor continued to help around town, building a reputation as the man you called when something needed to be done right. In 1874, Connor was offered a permanent position as deputy sheriff. The current sheriff was getting old and needed help maintaining order in town and the surrounding area. Connor was reluctant at first. He had sworn off violence after the war, but Clara encouraged him. "It is not the same as what you did in the war," she said. "This is protecting people, keeping them safe. You are so good at that." Connor accepted the position and proved to be an excellent lawman. He was calm in crisis situations, able to diffuse potential violence with his mere presence most of the time. The badge seemed to give him purpose beyond just surviving, and Clara saw him continue to grow and heal from his war wounds. 2 years later, Clara gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Emily. She had Clara's dark hair and Connor's blue eyes, and she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger from the moment she arrived. Samuel, now nearly 3, was delighted with his little sister and appointed himself her protector. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. Clara continued teaching, watching her students grow and learn and move on to their own lives. Connor served as deputy, then as sheriff when the old sheriff retired in 1878. They spent summers at the cabin with their children, teaching them to love the mountains as Connor did. Samuel grew into a strong, quiet boy like his father, while Emily was vivacious and talkative, inheriting her mother's social graces. In 1880, Clara gave birth to their third child, another boy they named Daniel. And in 1883, their fourth and final child arrived, a daughter named Rose, born during a spring snowstorm that reminded Clara of her wedding day. Through it all, through the chaos of raising 4 children and managing careers and maintaining a household, Clara and Connor never lost sight of what mattered most to each other. Every night, no matter how exhausting the day had been, they would sit together after the children were asleep, Connor's arm around Clara's shoulders, and talk about their day. Every weekend they could manage. They would ride out into the desert or up into the mountains, just the two of them, reconnecting. And sometimes, Clara would reach up and touch Connor's beard, grayer now, but still thick and soft, and he would go still, just like he had that very first time, like her touch still had the power to stop his world and remake it. "What are you thinking?" Clara would ask. "I am thinking about that day I found you on the mountain, half dead from thirst and sun. I'm thinking about how touching my beard changed everything. I'm thinking about how grateful I am that your horse went lame and you got lost and ended up exactly where you needed to be. You believe in fate now? I believe in us. I believe that somehow, against all odds, 2 broken people found each other and became whole." Clara would kiss him then, 30 years of marriage making the gesture no less powerful than it had been that first night under the stars. Not broken, just waiting for the right person to come along and show us who we could be. In 1895, Samuel graduated from college in San Francisco and returned to Carlin to take over his father's position as sheriff. Connor, now in his 50s and ready to slow down, was proud beyond measure. Emily had married a rancher and settled 20 miles outside of town. Daniel was studying to be a doctor, and Rose, at 12, was already showing signs of her mother's passion for education. Connor and Clara finally retired to the cabin full-time, leaving the little house in Carlin to Samuel and his new wife. The mountains welcomed them home, and they spent their days in peaceful contentment, watching the seasons change and the years pass. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Connor took Clara to the exact spot where he had first found her, collapsed and dying on that flat rock overlooking the valley. "I want to remember where it all started," he said, helping her down from her horse. They sat together on the rock, holding hands, looking out over the vast expanse of Nevada wilderness. Clara was 52 now, her dark hair streaked with silver, her face lined from years of laughter and worry and joy. Connor was 55, his beard fully gray, his body still strong but moving a bit slower than it once had. But when he looked at her, his eyes held the same intensity they had that very first day. "Do you have any regrets?" Clara asked. "Not a single one." "You?" "Only that I did not reach up and touch your beard sooner that night by the fire. We wasted a whole day before I did it." Connor laughed, the sound echoing across the valley. "We made up for it, I think." "We certainly did." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from decades of shared life. Finally, Connor spoke. "Thank you for saving me, Clara." "I think it was the other way around." "No. You saved me from a life of loneliness and regret. You gave me purpose and joy and a family. You gave me everything." Clara turned to him, reaching up to cup his bearded cheek in her palm. "You gave me the same. You taught me that love is not always convenient or sensible. Sometimes it is just a feeling that grabs hold of you and will not let go, and the only thing to do is hold on and enjoy the ride." Connor covered her hand with his, pressing it more firmly against his face. 30 years. 30 years since you touched my beard, and my whole world changed right there. And it keeps changing. Every day with you is a new adventure. Even when I am old and gray. Especially then, you are distinguished now, not just wild and intimidating. I'm still a little wild. Good. I like you wild. They kissed there on that rock, in the exact spot where their story had really begun, and Clara felt the same flutter in her chest that she had felt at 19. Age had not diminished the love between them, if anything. It had deepened it, adding layers of understanding and respect and shared history that only time could provide. They rode back to the cabin as the sun set, painting the sky in the same oranges and golds that had colored it the day Clara first arrived in Carlin. Inside, Connor built up the fire while Clara prepared dinner, working together with the easy synchronization of longtime partners. After they ate, they sat in the rocking chairs Connor had made years ago, side by side, watching the flames dance. "Tell me again," Clara said softly. "Tell me about finding me." Connor smiled. He had told this story hundreds of times to their children, to their grandchildren, to friends and neighbors, but he never tired of it. I was coming back from checking my trap line," he began. "I had been in the high country for 3 days, and I was thinking about nothing in particular. And then I saw you, sitting on that rock like a desert flower, so small and determined and stubborn. You would not give up, even though you had every reason to. And when I caught you before you fell, and you looked up at me, I felt something shift inside, like a door opening after being locked for years. And then I touched your beard. And then you touched my beard, and everything changed. It was like the universe was saying, 'Pay attention, this matters, she matters.' And I knew, right in that moment, that my life would never be the same." "Mine too," Clara said. "The moment my fingers touched your face, I felt it, like coming home to a place I had never been before." They rocked in silence for a while, the only sounds the crackling fire and the wind outside. Finally, Connor reached over and took Clara's hand. "I love you, Clara Hayes. More than mountains, more than sky, more than breath itself. I love you too, Connor Hayes, forever and always." They sat there together as night fell completely, two souls who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life of love and purpose from the ashes of their separate pasts. The mountains stood eternal outside their cabin, and inside, by the fire, Connor and Clara Hayes held hands and counted their blessings. Years later, when their great-grandchildren would ask how they met, Clara would smile and touch Connor's beard, and he would go still with remembered wonder. And they would tell the story of a desperate woman and a lonely mountain man, of a touch that changed everything, of love found in the vast wilderness of Nevada in 1872. "The important thing," Clara would say, "is that when love finds you, you have to be brave enough to reach for it, even if it does not make sense, even if it scares you. You reach up and touch it, and you hold on for dear life." Connor and Clara Hayes lived to see 5 grandchildren and 12 great-grandchildren. They never left the mountains they loved, though their children visited often, bringing the chaos and joy of family to the peaceful cabin. Connor died in 1908 at the age of 68, Clara holding his hand as he took his last breath. True to her word, she had reached for love all those years ago, and she never let go. Clara lived another 5 years, surrounded by family in the mountains that had become her home. On the day she died, her daughter Emily found her in the rocking chair by the fire, a peaceful smile on her face, her hand raised as if reaching out to touch someone's face. The family said she was reaching for Connor, touching his beard one last time, the gesture that had started it all. They buried Clara next to Connor on a hillside overlooking the valley in sight of the rock where they had first met. The headstone was simple. Connor and Clara Hayes, 2 souls, 1 heart. And on especially quiet evenings, when the wind blows just right through the Nevada mountains, locals swear you can still hear the sound of 2 rocking chairs creaking gently by a fire, keeping time with a love that death itself could not diminish. Their cabin still stands, maintained now as a historic site by their descendants, a testament to the wild, beautiful love that flourished there over 100 years ago. And every visitor who comes, every couple, every romantic, every person seeking to understand what true love looks like, hears the story of how a dying woman reached up and touched a lonely mountain man's beard, and in that single gesture changed 2 lives forever. The story of Connor and Clara Hayes became legend in Carlin and the surrounding territories, passed down through generations as proof that love can find you in the most unexpected places, at the most desperate times. That sometimes salvation comes not in the form you expect, but in exactly the form you need. That courage is not the absence of fear, but reaching for what matters despite it. Samuel Hayes, their eldest son, served as sheriff of Carlin for 35 years, raising his own family in the same tradition of love and service his parents had modeled. He married a schoolteacher like his father, and together they had 6 children. He kept his father's deputy badge in a place of honor above his fireplace, and he made sure his children knew the story of how their grandfather had been saved by love. Emily's ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful in the region. She had her mother's head for business and her father's calm strength, and she raised 4 daughters who all became remarkable women in their own right. She named her first daughter Clara, after her mother, and taught her granddaughters to reach for what they wanted with both hands. Daniel became a respected doctor, practicing in Carson City but making regular trips home to Carlin. He never married, dedicating his life instead to healing, but he was beloved by his many nieces and nephews. He always said he was looking for a love like his parents had, and if he could not find that, he would rather be alone. Those who knew him respected his choice. Rose, the youngest, did become a teacher like her mother, but she took it further, eventually founding a school for girls in San Francisco. She married late, at 35, to a professor of literature, and they had 2 children. She wrote a book about her parents' love story that became a bestseller in 1920, introducing Connor and Clara Hayes to a new generation. The Hayes family grew and spread across the West, but they never forgot their roots in that mountain cabin, never forgot the story of the woman who reached up and touched a mountain man's beard and changed the world. Every generation produced at least 1 sheriff, 1 teacher, 1 person dedicated to service and community, carrying on the legacy Clara and Connor had begun. And always, always, there were the mountains. The Hayes family maintained the cabin lovingly, using it for family reunions and retreats, a place to reconnect with their history and with each other. The valley where Connor found Clara remained unchanged by time, still vast and beautiful and wild, a reminder that some things are eternal. In 1972, on the 100th anniversary of Connor and Clara's meeting, the Hayes family erected a small monument at the spot where it all began. The bronze plaque reads simply, "Here, in September 1872, Clara Kendall Hayes reached up and touched Connor Hayes's beard. His whole world changed right there, and ours began. Love, courage, hope, this is our foundation." Every year, descendants gather at the monument and at the graves, telling the stories, sharing the memories, keeping alive the legacy of 2 people who found each other when they both needed finding most. Young couples visit the spot, hoping some of that magic will rub off on them. Proposals happen there regularly, always met with success, as if Connor and Clara themselves are blessing the unions. The rocking chairs that Connor made, where he and Clara spent countless evenings, are now in the Nevada State Museum, preserved behind glass, but still radiating the love that soaked into their wood over decades of use. Visitors stand before them, imagining the conversations that happened there, the comfortable silences, the life that was lived. But the true legacy of Connor and Clara Hayes is not in museums or monuments, or even in the cabin that still stands. It is in the lives they touched, the example they set, the proof they provided that love, real, deep, lasting love, is possible even in the hardest of times, even in the wildest of places. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is reach out and touch someone's face, opening yourself to connection and vulnerability and the possibility of having your whole world changed. Their story reminds us that heroes are not always the loudest or the most obvious. Sometimes they are quiet mountain men who save desperate women. Sometimes they are school teachers who see the good in broken soldiers. Sometimes they are just two people who recognize in each other the thing they have been missing, and who have the courage to reach for it with both hands. Connor and Clara Hayes lived an extraordinary life, built from ordinary moments, a touch, a kiss, a conversation by firelight. They raised children and built community and loved each other with a fierceness that transcended their humble circumstances. They proved that you do not need wealth or status or perfect conditions to create a life of meaning and joy. You just need love, commitment, and the willingness to keep choosing each other day after day, year after year, through whatever challenges arise. And sometimes, late at night in the Nevada mountains, if you listen very carefully, you can still hear it, the sound of two people rocking gently by a fire, holding hands, counting their blessings. The mountain man and his wife, together forever in the place where it all began, where a simple touch changed everything, where love wrote its name on the wilderness and called it home. This is the story of Connor and Clara Hayes, whose love began with a touch and lasted beyond death, whose legacy lives on in every person who believes that love is worth reaching for, worth fighting for, worth building a life around. In the wild west of Nevada in 1872, under a sky full of stars, two souls found each other and proved that the greatest adventure is not conquering the wilderness, but opening your heart to another person. She reached up and touched his beard. The mountain man went still. His whole world changed right there. And from that moment forward, neither of them was ever alone again.